History isn't just a collection of dusty books. It's a map of things we were never meant to find. We like to think of archaeologists as heroes uncovering the truth, but sometimes they are more like guards standing at a door that should have stayed locked. Today, we're crossing the line. From blades that crave blood to tombs guarded by toxic rivers, we are counting down 12 relics that aren't just historically significant, they are physically dangerous. Some secrets were buried for a reason, and some doors, they are better left unopened. Imagine standing in Xi'an, China, in 1974. A group of farmers is digging a well hoping for water, but instead they strike something hard. Something made of clay. They had no idea. They had just stumbled upon the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century, and perhaps the most dangerous. This is the Terracotta Army. Over 8,000 life-size soldiers, horses, and chariots, each with a unique face, standing in battle formation. They were built to protect Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, in the afterlife. But while the soldiers are world-famous, it's what lies beyond them that keeps modern scientists awake at night. The soldiers are just the perimeter. The real mystery is the emperor's central tomb. Despite having the technology to dig it up, the Chinese government hasn't touched it in 50 years. Why? Because it's not just a grave, it's a lethal trap. According to ancient records, by the historian Sima Qian, the emperor's tomb is a miniature replica of his empire, complete with palaces, towers, and most incredibly, rivers and seas made of flowing liquid mercury. For decades, people thought this was just a myth, a legend to scare away tomb raiders. But modern soil analysis has proven otherwise. Scientists have detected mercury levels in the surrounding soil that are hundreds of times higher than normal. Think about that. If you open that tomb, you aren't just looking at history, you are walking into a cloud of highly toxic mercury vapor. It would be an environmental and biological disaster. But the danger isn't just chemical, it's structural. The tomb was designed with elaborate booby traps. Ancient texts describe auto-firing crossbows triggered by hidden floor plates, designed to pierce any intruder. Even if the wooden mechanisms have rotted over 2,000 years, the psychological weight of these traps remains. And then there's the preservation crisis. When the first terracotta soldiers were unearthed, their vibrant colors, reds, purples, and blues, vanished in seconds. The moment they hit the dry air, the lacquer curled and flaked off. Opening the main chamber could mean destroying the emperor's final resting place forever within minutes of exposure to oxygen. So we have a tomb filled with neurotoxic mercury, potential ancient traps, and treasures that might crumble if we breathe on them. Qin Shi Huang wanted to live forever, and in a way, his tomb has achieved a terrifying kind of immortality. It is a place where time stands still, guarded by a poison that flows like water. It's not that we can't move it. It's that we dare not. The emperor still rules his silent empire, and for now, the world is content to stay outside the door. Deep within the heart of Bengal, where the humid air hangs heavy with the scent of incense and marigolds, resides a power that has terrified and fascinated the world for millennia. We are talking about the ancient Kali statue. But this isn't just a piece of religious art. In the eyes of the locals and those who guard her, she is a living, breathing force, and one that is far too dangerous to move. To understand why, you first have to look at her. Kali is the Hindu goddess of time, creation, destruction, and power. She is often depicted with deep blue or midnight black skin, a tongue protruding in a moment of cosmic realization, and a garland of human heads around her neck. She represents the ultimate truth, that time consumes all things. But the ancient statues found in the remote temples of Bengal carry a specific, heavy energy that modern archaeology struggles to explain. There's a story told by the village elders about a colonial-era attempt to relocate one such statue to a museum in Europe. The officials arrived with heavy machinery and chains, dismissing the warnings of the temple priests as mere superstition. As soon as the first chain was tightened, the sky, which had been clear seconds before, turned a bruised purple. A freak storm rolled in with such violence that the machinery sank into the mud. Men fell ill with sudden, unexplainable fevers. The project was abandoned within 48 hours. The statue didn't just stay. It refused to leave. Archaeologically, these statues are often carved from a specific type of black stone that seems to vibrate at a frequency different from the surrounding earth. Some researchers suggest that the placement of these icons isn't accidental. They are situated on what some call ley lines or intersections of intense geomagnetic activity. Moving the statue, the locals believe, would be like pulling a vital component out of a nuclear reactor. It wouldn't just break the statue, it would rupture the spiritual and physical equilibrium of the entire region. But the danger isn't just in the physics or the weather. It's in the prana pratishta, the ritual of breath. In Bengal, a Kali statue isn't considered finished until a high priest performs a ceremony to invite the deity's essence into the stone. Once this happens, the statue is no longer an object. It is a guest. And you don't just put a guest of that magnitude into a wooden crate and ship them across the ocean. There are accounts of the curse of the unseen. Individuals who have attempted to steal or desecrate these icons often report a sensation of being watched by 1,000 eyes. Some have suffered from the heavy chest, a feeling that the very gravity around them has increased, making it impossible to breathe. Is it psychological? Is it the power of suggestion? Or is there something about the geometry and the material of these ancient relics that interacts with the human nervous system in ways we don't yet understand? In the shadows of the temple, the priests will tell you that Kali is the mother who protects, but she is also the fire that consumes. They believe the statue remains in its place because it is tethered to the ground by the blood of the earth itself. To move her is to invite pralaya, total dissolution. Scientists might call it magnetic interference or cultural taboo. The devotees call it divine presence. But whatever you choose to believe, the fact remains. These statues stay where they were placed centuries ago. They sit in the dark, draped in red hibiscus flowers, staring out with wide, unblinking eyes, waiting for the end of time. And as long as they stay there, the world remains in balance. But the moment we try to claim her for a museum shelf, that is a risk no one is truly willing to take. In the world of Japanese swords, one name stands above all others for its beauty, Masamune. But there is another name that samurai only whispered in fear, a name synonymous with madness, bloodlust, and tragedy. Muramasa Sengo. To look at a Muramasa blade is to look at a masterpiece of metallurgy. The waves on the steel, the heimin, are perfectly symmetrical, mirroring each other on both sides of the blade. They are incredibly sharp, capable of slicing a fallen leaf in two. But in Japan, these aren't just weapons. They are considered uyonoto, evil swords. And for centuries, they were so dangerous that owning one was a crime punishable by death. The legend begins with the man himself. Muramasa was said to be a brilliant but violent and unstable swordsmith. It was believed that while he forged his steel, he poured his own burning rage and madness into the metal. The result, a blade that had a soul, but a soul that was never satisfied. The stories are chilling. It is said that once a Muramasa blade is drawn, it demands blood before it can be returned to its scabbard. If the wielder did not kill an enemy, the sword would force them to cut themselves, or worse, turn the blade on a friend or family member. It was as if the steel had a hunger that the user could not control. This wasn't just folklore. The Tokugawa shogunate, the military government that ruled Japan for over 250 years, officially banned Muramasa blades. Why? Because they seemed cursed specifically to destroy the Tokugawa family. The shogun's grandfather was killed by a Muramasa. His father was wounded by one. Even the shogun himself accidentally cut his hand on a Muramasa blade. To the ruling class, these weren't just coincidences. The blades were seen as spiritual assassins, waiting for the moment to strike. During the Great Purge, thousands of Muramasa blades were destroyed, hidden, or had their signatures erased to avoid the executioner's axe. But some survived. And this is where the forbidden part of the archaeology comes in. Modern collectors and museum curators who handle these blades often report a strange, chilling sensation. It's not a physical danger like a trap or poison, but something psychological. There is a documented phenomenon where people feel an overwhelming urge to test the edge, a sudden spike in aggression when the cold steel touches their palm. Scientists might call it the Lucifer effect, or the power of myth. But for the experts in Tokyo, the protocol is clear. These blades are kept under strict lock and key. They are rarely moved, and when they are, it is done with intense spiritual ritual. They are never displayed in a way that allows them to be easily unsheathed. Because even today, in a world of silicon and satellites, there is a lingering fear that the madness of Muramasa Sengo is still vibrating inside that steel. Moving a Muramasa isn't just moving a relic. It's transporting a 500-year-old hunger. It is a reminder that sometimes the things we create can end up owning us. The blades sit in their silk-lined boxes, silent and terrifyingly sharp, waiting. And as long as they stay sheathed, the world is safe from their ancient, metallic rage. If you travel to the Nara Prefecture in Japan, you will find a place where time seems to have surrendered. Hōryū-ji, the Temple of the Flourishing Law. It is home to some of the oldest wooden structures on the planet, standing strong for over 1,300 years. But deep within its silent corridors hangs an object that possesses a power far beyond its physical form. The Hōryū-ji bell. At first glance, it looks like any other ancient temple bell. Heavy bronze, green with the patina of centuries, decorated with celestial motifs. But this bell is never moved. It is rarely rung. And in the world of forbidden archaeology, it is whispered that the bell is not just a relic, it is a stabilizer for the very earth it sits upon. The story goes back to the foundation of the temple by Prince Shotoku. It is said that the bell was cast with a specific alloy and tuned to a frequency that matches the Om, the primordial sound of the universe. For over a millennium, the monks have guarded it with a devotion that borders on obsession. Why? Because according to local prophecy, if the bell is moved from its consecrated spot, the protection over the land will shatter. In the 19th century, during a period of intense modernization, there were whispers of moving the bell to a national collection. Local legends say that the night the proposal was made, the ground beneath the temple began to moan. A series of minor tremors localized only around the belfry convinced the authorities that some things are tied to the earth by more than just gravity. But there is a scientific layer to this mystery that is even more fascinating. Modern acoustic researchers have studied the resonance of ancient bronze bells. They've discovered that certain frequencies can actually affect human brainwaves and even the structural integrity of ancient wood. The Hōryū-ji structures are made of cypress, wood that is technically dead but still breathes and reacts to vibrations. It is believed that the specific tone of this bell, when struck at the correct intervals, actually helps preserve the molecular structure of the surrounding wooden pagodas. To move the bell is to silence the vibration that has kept these buildings standing through 1,000 years of earthquakes and storms. It is a biological and architectural symphony. Archaeologists who have visited the site speak of a hush that surrounds the bell, a zone of silence where the air feels thicker. There is a psychological weight to it. You don't just see the bell. You feel it in your marrow. The monks believe that the bell holds the karmic memory of the nation. To transport it like a common piece of scrap metal would be to sever the connection between the past and the future. In the 1920s, a researcher reportedly tried to take a small rubbing of the bell's inscription without permission. He claimed that the moment his paper touched the bronze, a sound like a low, subterranean growl vibrated through his boots, though the bell never moved an inch. He left empty-handed, convinced that the bell was aware. Today, the Hōryū-ji bell remains exactly where it was placed over a dozen centuries ago. It is a relic that is too dangerous to move because it is more than an object. It is a guardian of resonance. It teaches us that some things are not meant to be possessed or displayed in a museum gallery. They are meant to stay rooted, humming their silent song, keeping the world from falling apart. As the sun sets over Nara, the bell remains silent, but its presence is a thunderous reminder. Some vibrations are better left undisturbed. Throughout history, no relic has inspired more obsession, blood, and cinematic wonder than the Ark of the Covenant. According to the Hebrew Bible, It is a gold-plated wooden chest containing the 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. But for those who study forbidden archaeology, the Ark isn't just a religious symbol, it is a lethal piece of ancient technology. A relic so dangerous that for 3,000 years, anyone who touched it without protection was said to be struck dead by fire from the heavens. The Ark has been missing since the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 587 BC. But if you travel to the city of Aksum in Ethiopia, you'll find a small building called the Chapel of the Tablet. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims the Ark is there, right now. But there's a catch. You can't see it. No one can. Only one person is allowed in the presence of the Ark, the guardian monk. Once chosen, he is confined to the chapel for the rest of his life. He cannot leave, and he cannot be replaced until he dies. And here's the terrifying part. The monks who guard the Ark often develop cataracts, skin lesions, and strange illnesses shortly after taking their post. Modern researchers have a startling theory. They suggest the Ark wasn't just a box, but a massive electrical capacitor. Think about the construction. Gold is a perfect conductor, and wood is a perfect insulator. If the Ark functioned like a Leyden jar, it could have accumulated a massive static charge of thousands of volts. This would explain why the Bible gives strict instructions on how to move it, using wooden poles inserted through gold rings so the priests never touched the main body. It also explains why Uzzah, a man in the Bible, was instantly killed when he reached out to steady the Ark as it tilted. He grounded the circuit. But the danger in Aksum might be even more modern. Some fringe theorists and scientists who've analyzed the guardian monk's symptoms suggest that the Ark might be radioactive. If the stones inside were a source of high-energy particles, the chapel wouldn't just be a temple. It would be a containment chamber. This is why the relic is considered too dangerous to move. To transport it would be to risk a radioactive leak or an electrical discharge that we simply don't have the protocols to handle. Beyond the physical danger, there is the geopolitical powder keg. The Ark is the ultimate prize for 3 of the world's major religions. If anyone attempted to move it or even prove its existence with modern scans, it could trigger a global conflict. The secrecy isn't just about religious tradition, it's a matter of global security. In the 1940s, it was rumored that various intelligence agencies attempted to gain access to the chapel. All were rebuffed. The monks don't care about science or politics. They care about the presence. They believe that the Ark is the footstool of God on earth, and that its power is too raw, too holy, and too destructive for a world that has forgotten how to handle the divine. So the Ark remains in Aksum, hidden behind a modest stone wall, guarded by a man who is slowly dying from its proximity. It is a relic that science wants to study, but humanity is terrified to touch. It is the ultimate forbidden object, a bridge between the world of men and a power that doesn't play by our rules. As long as it stays in that chapel, the secret is safe. But if it ever leaves, the world might just find out what the wrath of God actually looks like in a lab report. Deep within the fortified walls of Edinburgh Castle, behind layered glass and ironclad security, sits the honours of Scotland. Among them is the crown of King James VI, a masterpiece of gold, silver, and precious gemstones. It is the oldest crown jewel in the British Isles. But don't let its beauty deceive you. In the world of forbidden archaeology, this crown is considered active. It carries a weight that isn't measured in carats, but in the dark history of the monarchs who wore it. The story of this crown is a story of survival, but at a terrible cost. James VI was a king obsessed with the supernatural. He wrote a famous book on demonology and led some of the most brutal witch hunts in history. Legends say that during his reign, the crown was cleansed with rituals that many would consider dark today. The belief was that the crown wasn't just a symbol of the king's authority, but a vessel for the divine right, a literal connection to the heavens that no commoner could survive touching. There is a chilling record from the 17th century. During the English Civil War, the crown was hidden to prevent it from being destroyed by Oliver Cromwell's forces. It was buried under the floorboards of a church and moved in secret by commoners. Legend has it that those who handled the crown without the royal blood suffered a string of bizarre tragedies. One man reportedly lost his sight within days. Another fell into a permanent state of melancholy, claiming he could hear the whispers of dead kings whenever he was near the relic. But why is it too dangerous to move today? Beyond its immense historical value, there is a lingering protocol in Scottish heritage. In 1818, the famous writer Sir Walter Scott rediscovered the crown after it had been locked away in a chest for over a century. When he finally opened the chest, the air in the room supposedly turned freezing. One of the men in the room reached out to jokingly place the crown on a young lady's head. Scott allegedly screamed, "No, by God!" stopping him just in time. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a premonition that to treat this object as a mere hat would invite a national catastrophe. Modern museum curators handle the crown with extreme, almost ritualistic care. They use specialized gloves, not just to protect the gold, but to maintain the sanctity of the object. There are stories whispered among the castle guards about the room of the crown. They claim that late at night, the air around the display case vibrates with a low, hum-like frequency. Some say it's the ventilation, others say it's the crown itself, still pulsing with the energy of a king who believed he was an instrument of God. There is also a physical danger. Ancient gemstones, particularly those in crowns that have been buried or hidden in damp conditions, can harbor rare types of fungi or chemical outgassing from the degrading alloys used in the 1500s. To move it without a vacuum-sealed environment is to risk destroying the relic and potentially exposing handlers to ancient pathogens. But the real reason we don't move it is symbolic. This crown represents the soul of a nation that refused to be conquered. To move it from its place in Edinburgh is seen as an act of spiritual surrender. It stays on its velvet cushion, staring back at the thousands of tourists who pass by. A golden circle that has seen heads fall and empires rise. It is a reminder that some objects are so saturated with the blood and belief of history that they become more than metal. They become a warning. Some burdens are too heavy for any one person to carry. In 1831, on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides, a sand dune collapsed after a fierce storm, revealing a small stone chamber. Inside, tucked away like a dark secret, sat 78 chess pieces carved from walrus ivory and whale's teeth. But these weren't the abstract shapes we recognize today. These were tiny, detailed figures with wide, staring eyes and expressions of pure, unadulterated terror. To look at the Lewis chessmen is to feel someone, or something, looking back at you. The kings clutch their swords with white-knuckled intensity. The queens hold their faces in their hands, looking as if they've just witnessed a massacre. And the warders, the rooks, are biting their shields in a state of berserker rage. Archaeologists believe they were carved in Norway around the 12th century, likely lost or hidden by a merchant traveling to Ireland. But there is a reason these pieces are often displayed behind thick glass and rarely moved together as a full set. There is an unsettling energy reported by those who spend too much time in their presence. Local folklore on the island suggests the chessmen weren't just carvings, they were containment vessels. Legend says that a young shepherd found the stash first, but he was so terrified by the soulless gaze of the ivory men that he fled, believing he had stumbled upon a gathering of small demons. Shortly after, he met a violent end. When the pieces were eventually sold and scattered, a string of bad luck followed the buyers. Bankruptcies, sudden illnesses, and a sense of being followed by small, ivory footsteps. But the real forbidden aspect of the Lewis chessmen lies in their psychological impact. Modern curators have noticed that when the pieces are arranged in a full battle formation, the atmosphere in the room shifts. It's known as the staring effect. The way the eyes are carved, deep and hollow, creates an optical illusion where they seem to follow you from every angle. It triggers a primal fight or flight response in the human brain. There is also the physical fragility. Walrus ivory is a biological material that has spent 700 years buried in cold, damp sand. It has reached a delicate equilibrium with the earth. To move them frequently, or to expose them to the natural oils of human skin, is to risk the weeping of the ivory, a process where the material cracks and releases trapped bacteria from the medieval era. Archaeologists often debate why they were buried in the first place. Were they hidden from thieves? Or were they exorcised? Buried in a stone chamber because the owner realized that playing a game with these pieces meant inviting their grim expressions into his own life? Today, they are split between the British Museum and the National Museum of Scotland. They are moved only with the highest level of vibration-dampening technology. Because as any grandmaster will tell you, a game of chess is a battle of minds. But with the Lewis Chessmen, it feels like the battle is already over. And we are just looking at the survivors of a nightmare. They stay in their cases, their eyes wide, their shields raised, waiting for a game that should never be played again. In the heart of the Louvre, among the glittering crowns and royal regalia of France, rests a blade that supposedly forged an empire. Joyeuse, the personal sword of Charlemagne, the father of Europe. For over 1,000 years, this weapon was used in the coronation ceremonies of French kings, from Philip the Bold to Charles X. But Joyeuse is not just a masterpiece of gold and steel. In the world of forbidden archaeology, it is a relic of shifting nature. An object so tied to the identity of a nation that moving it feels like disturbing the fabric of time itself. The legends surrounding Joyeuse are as sharp as its edge. Ancient chronicles claim the sword was forged from the same metal as the Spear of Destiny. It was said to change its color 30 times a day, glowing with a celestial light that blinded Charlemagne's enemies on the battlefield. But there is a darker side to this brilliance. The sword was believed to be bound to the fate of the monarch. If the sword was bright, the empire was safe. If it grew dull, blood would soon flow in the streets of Paris. Archaeologists face a massive headache when studying Joyeuse. Why? Because the sword is a Frankenstein of history. The pommel dates back to the 10th century, the crossguard to the 12th, and the scabbard even later. It is a relic that has been reborn multiple times. But the core, the blade itself, remains a mystery. Some metallurgical scans suggest the innermost steel is far older than the decorations surrounding it. It's as if the sword has been constantly fed new parts to keep its ancient spirit alive. So, why is it too dangerous to move? First, there is the sovereignty curse. Throughout French history, whenever Joyeuse was moved far from its place of rest or handled by those without legitimate power, chaos followed. During the French Revolution, the sword was seized, and shortly after, the nation descended into the Reign of Terror. It is as if the blade possesses a monarchical gravity. It demands a stable, orderly environment, and when that stability is broken, the relic radiates a sense of unrest. Modern curators treat Joyeuse with a level of caution that borders on the religious. It is kept in a climate-controlled vacuum, but the danger isn't just rust. It's the physical integrity of the composite parts. Because the sword is made of different alloys from different centuries, they expand and contract at different rates. Moving it, subjecting it to the slight vibrations of transport or changes in atmospheric pressure, could cause the sword to literally shatter itself from the inside out. The gold would pull away from the iron, the gems would reject their settings. But beyond the physics, there is the shadow of the emperor. Guards at the Louvre have whispered about a strange phenomenon near the Joyeuse display. On certain nights, the light reflected off the blade doesn't match the lamps in the room. It's as if the sword is still shifting colors, flickering with a ghost of the light Charlemagne once carried into battle. To move Joyeuse is to risk breaking the most important link in European history. It is a relic that stays put because it is the anchor of a 1,000-year-old story. It reminds us that power is fragile, and some symbols are so heavy with the ghosts of kings that they are better left exactly where they are. Behind the glass, silent and still glowing with a light we can no longer explain. Deep in the mist-shrouded forests of Romania, there is a place called the Snagov Monastery. It sits on a tiny island surrounded by dark, freezing waters. To most, it is a place of prayer. But for historians and fans of the macabre, it is the site of one of the greatest mysteries in forbidden archaeology, the tomb of Vlad III, better known to the world as Dracula. But here's the problem. The tomb is a lie, or perhaps it's a warning. In the early 20th century, archaeologists decided to do the unthinkable. They decided to open the final resting place of the impaler. They expected to find a body clad in royal silks, perhaps a silver sword, or at the very least, a skeleton. But when the heavy stone slab was finally pried open, the air in the monastery reportedly turned foul. Inside the coffin, there was no prints. There was only a collection of horse bones and ancient rubbish. Where is the real body of the man who inspired the greatest vampire legend in history? This is where the archaeology becomes forbidden. There are local legends in Transylvania that claim Vlad's body was never meant to be found. They believe his remains were moved to a second, secret location. A hidden heart buried deep beneath the earth, protected by a curse of blood. The people of the region refuse to speak of its location. They believe that to move the real coffin, wherever it may be, is to disturb a slumbering malice that the world isn't prepared to face. Modern researchers who have tried to use ground-penetrating radar in the forests surrounding his castles often report strange equipment failures. Batteries that were full suddenly die. GPS signals move in circles. Skeptics call it magnetic interference from the mountains. Locals call it the cloaking. But why is the idea of moving his remains so dangerous? Beyond the myth of the vampire, Vlad III was a man of extreme violence. His death was a decapitation, his head sent to Constantinople as a trophy. In the belief system of the time, a body buried without its head, or in an unholy manner, becomes a strigoi, a restless spirit. Archaeology in this region isn't just about digging, it's about navigating a landscape of active fear. In the 1970s, a team of researchers allegedly found a hidden chamber beneath a ruined fortress. They reported finding a heavy, lead-lined casket. But before it could be excavated, the project was shut down by the authorities without explanation. The records were sealed. Rumors swirled that the team had suffered a string of accidental deaths, much like those who opened the tomb of Tutankhamun. To move the coffin of Vlad III is to invite a psychological and cultural trauma back into the world. It is a relic that stays lost, because in a way, we want it to stay lost. We prefer the mystery to the reality. The empty tomb at Snagov stands as a reminder. Some men were so terrifying in life that even in death, their absence is more powerful than their presence. The coffin, if it exists, is too dangerous to move because it represents the point where history ends and folklore begins. It is a void that refuses to be filled. And as the wind howls through the ruins of Poenari Castle, you realize that some graves aren't kept closed to keep the world out. They are kept closed to keep what's inside in, because as long as he is nowhere, he is everywhere. In the National Library of Sweden, there sits a book so massive it requires 2 people to lift it. It's called the Codex Gigas, the giant book. It is 36 inches tall and contains the entire Bible, medical treatises, and magical incantations. But it isn't the size that makes it forbidden. It is the legend of its creation, and a single, terrifying page that has earned it the name, the Devil's Bible. The story takes us back to the 13th century, to a monastery in Bohemia. A monk, having broken his vows, was sentenced to be walled up alive. In a desperate bid for his life, he promised to write a book that would contain all human knowledge in a single night. As midnight approached, realizing the task was impossible, the monk didn't pray to God. He prayed to the fallen angel. Legend says the devil answered, completing the 310 pages of parchment, but leaving a self-portrait on page 290 as a signature of his work. When you look at that page, the energy in the room seems to change. It is a full-page illustration of a green-faced clawed demon staring out with an expression of bizarre, eternal triumph. But here is where the forbidden archaeology starts to get real. For centuries, this book was moved from monastery to castle to library, and every single place that housed it suffered a catastrophe. In 1648, the Swedish army looted it from Prague. Shortly after, the royal palace in Stockholm, where the book was kept, burned to the ground. Legend says the book was thrown out of a window to save it from the flames, and as it fell, it supposedly landed with such force that it caused the ground to tremble. Why is it too dangerous to move today? Modern forensic handwriting analysis has revealed something impossible. The entire book, every letter, every decoration, was written by a single person. But based on the consistency of the ink and the penmanship, it would have taken 30 years of non-stop writing to complete. Yet, the handwriting doesn't show any signs of aging, fatigue, or illness from the beginning to the end. It is as if the writer was frozen in time, or, as the legend suggests, it truly was written in one supernatural burst of energy. Scientists who study the Codex Gigas are extremely hesitant to move it for more than just historical reasons. The vellum is made from the skins of 160 donkeys. It is hypersensitive to light and humidity. But there's a psychological barrier too. Curators have noted that those who study the Devil's Page for too long report a sense of profound spiritual exhaustion. There are dead zones of sound around the book, where the air feels unnaturally still. In the world of the occult, the Codex Gigas is believed to be an active gateway. Moving it, according to some, is like shifting a cornerstone of a dark cathedral. It stays in its climate-controlled, low-light vault, guarded by modern sensors and ancient fears. Is it just a masterpiece of medieval dedication? Or is it a contract signed in ink and shadows? We don't move the Codex Gigas because we don't want to find out what happens when the giant is disturbed. It sits there, open to its most famous page, a silent monument to a night when a man traded his soul for a pen. In the world of the paranormal, some objects are haunted. Others are something much worse. They are containers. This is the Dybbuk box, a simple, unassuming wine cabinet that became the most haunted object of the internet age. But for those who have owned it, the joke ended very, very quickly. It is a relic of forbidden archaeology, not because of its age, but because of what is trapped inside. A Dybbuk, a restless, malicious spirit from Jewish folklore, capable of possessing the living. The story began in 2001 when a restoration artist bought the box at an estate sale. The previous owner was a Holocaust survivor who had one strict rule: the box must never, ever be opened. Of course, curiosity is a dangerous thing. The moment the box was pried open, the nightmare began. The new owner reported a smell of jasmine and dried flowers, followed by the stench of cat urine and rotting eggs. But it wasn't just the smell, it was the effect on reality. Every owner of the box reported the same string of tragedies: terrifying nightmares of a haggard old woman, sudden strokes, strange skin rashes, and a pervasive sense of doom that followed them even when they were miles away from the object. One owner even reported that all the light bulbs in his house shattered simultaneously while he was in the same room as the box. When you look at the box, it seems harmless. It's made of wood, carved with 2 doors. But inside, archaeologists and researchers found a collection of bizarre items: 2 1920s pennies, a lock of blonde hair bound with cord, a lock of black hair, and a small golden wine goblet. These aren't just random trinkets. In the occult world, these are tethers, objects used in a ritual to bind a consciousness to a physical vessel. Why is it too dangerous to move? Today, the Dybbuk box is owned by Zach Bagans and kept in his haunted museum in Las Vegas. It is stored inside a specially consecrated glass chamber, surrounded by salt and protective symbols. But even then, it isn't safe. When world-famous musician Post Malone touched the glass casing of the box in 2018, his life spiraled into a series of bizarre accidents: an emergency plane landing, a drive-by shooting, and a high-speed car crash, all within a single month. Scientific skeptics call it the nocebo effect, the power of suggestion causing physical symptoms. But the sheer volume of consistent reports makes even the most hardened researchers hesitate. There is a psychological gravity to the box. It seems to feed on fear, and the more it is moved, the more active it becomes. The box is a relic of the darkest chapter of human history, the Holocaust. It is said the spirit inside was summoned during a seance in a concentration camp by people who had lost everything and wanted to trap the evil they were witnessing. To move the box, to open it, or even to focus too much energy on it, is believed to weaken the seal. It remains behind glass, under 24-hour surveillance, not to protect it from thieves, but to protect the world from it. It is a reminder that some doors are locked for a reason, And some containers hold things that were never meant to breathe our air. As the museum lights go down, the Dybbuk box sits in total silence. A small wooden cage for a nightmare that is always, always looking for a way out. Our final relic isn't a crown, a sword, or a book. It is a person. In 1991, two German tourists hiking in the Ötzi Alps stumbled upon what they thought was a modern murder victim. But they were wrong by about 5,000 years. This was Ötzi, a Copper Age man preserved so perfectly in the ice that his skin, his tattoos, and even the last meal in his stomach were still intact. He is the ultimate archaeological treasure, but for many, he is also the world's most dangerous passenger. Almost immediately after Ötzi was removed from his icy grave, a dark pattern began to emerge. It's what local researchers call the curse of the Iceman. To date, 7 people associated with his discovery or study have died, many under sudden or bizarre circumstances. It started with Helmut Simon, the man who first found Ötzi. Years later, he returned to the same mountains, only to be caught in a freak blizzard and fall to his death in a ravine. The head of the mountain rescue team sent to find him, he died of a heart attack just an hour after Simon's funeral. Then there was Rainer Henn, the forensic pathologist who first touched Ötzi with his bare hands. He died in a violent car crash while on his way to give a lecture about the mummy. One by one, the list grew. A mountain guide killed in an avalanche, a molecular biologist found dead of a rare blood disease. Is it a coincidence? Or did we disturb something that was meant to be frozen forever? Today, Ötzi is kept at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Italy. But he isn't just lying on a shelf. He is stored in a highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar cold chamber. The temperature is fixed at exactly -6 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is kept at 98%. Why? Because the moment he is moved or the temperature fluctuates, he begins to degrade. But more than that, there is a logistical fear. Moving Ötzi requires a level of biological containment usually reserved for the world's deadliest viruses. Scientists have found over 19 different types of modern bacteria on his skin, but also ancient pathogens that the modern human immune system hasn't encountered in 5,000 years. To move him is to risk a biological bridge between the ancient past and the present. But the most chilling part of Ötzi isn't his curse, it's his story. X-rays revealed an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder and defensive wounds on his hands. He was murdered. He was running for his life when the ice finally claimed him. When we look at Ötzi, we are looking at a frozen moment of ancient violence. Archaeologists treat him with a reverence that borders on fear. He is rarely ever touched by human hands now. He remains behind a small, triple-paned glass window. You can look at him, but you can never reach him. He is a relic that is too dangerous to move because he is a silent witness to a crime that time forgot. And perhaps, as the local legends suggest, the Iceman doesn't want to be a museum exhibit. He wants to return to the silence of the peaks. As we close this list of 12 forbidden relics, we realize a common thread. Humanity's insatiable curiosity often leads us to places we don't belong. Whether it's the mercury rivers of China or the frozen heart of the Alps, some things are buried to protect us, and some are buried to protect themselves. The next time you see a "Do Not Enter" sign at an excavation site, remember Ötzi, remember the Ark, and remember that some history is better left in the dark.